Super. As I said, my name is Patrick. Super excited to be here today. I'm the co-founder of Procuros. We're a Hamburg-based startup that works on supply chain automations with AI. So incredibly excited for the big crowd today and to share a little bit what we're doing. Before we get started, we have a QR code. So if during the talk you want to put questions or comments or anything, you can do that here. And while you have your phones in your hand, there's one little task you have before we get started, and that is to take your favorite LLM, whether that's ChatGPT, whatever it is, and type in a prompt. And that prompt is, in one line, how would you use AI to optimize supply chains? Or whatever version of that, but a short version so that you get an answer in kind of like one line or less. So just any LLM that you use, and we're going to come back to that in a little bit. But it should be good inspiration to start the talk. Nice, cool. So the big question today is by William Shakespeare, to AI or not to AI, and I think that's what kind of is moving all of us right now. Of course, this is a William Shakespeare deepfake, not the original one that said this. But I think the overarching theme of this is, where does it actually make sense to use AI to improve your supply chains, and where is it maybe rather not the right thing? And just to give you guys a little bit of context before we dive in, today the way that supply chains work is there's one company that has Odoo as an ERP system, and then any interaction with the outside world usually creates a lot of friction, a lot of manual work, and so on. And so just to give you a couple of examples, you might have a 3PL, so a logistics company, fulfillment company, and with this company, you're basically exchanging emails. So whenever you want to ship something, you're sending them an email, say, hey guys, I want to ship this, and then they respond to you maybe with an Excel sheet with the inventory, and you put that back into your system. And then there's a lot of kind of like manual work and back and forth on this. The other thing that you can do is traditional EDI. I don't know, maybe by a show of hands, who knows EDI in this room? Who has heard of this? So quite a few people. So EDI technology from the 1980s has been around for quite some time, hasn't improved ever since. And so when you want to do an EDI connection, it's usually a one-to-one connection. So every time you have a customer, for instance, that you want to connect to via EDI, you have to build a one-to-one interface. And so that takes a long time. And so all of this leads to the fact that whenever you have your Odoo and your ERP system, everything that happens within that system is usually quite nice and works well. And then everything that happens with the outside world creates a ton of friction. And so the question is, if and how we can use AI to make that a lot simpler and a lot better. And so that's where we come into play with Procuros. So what we basically do is we're an AI automation collaboration layer. We sit in front of the ERP system, and then we handle a lot of these external interactions. So we might sit and connect a supplier to their retail partners, or to their 3PL, or even to their suppliers. And then anything that happens in kind of like the back and forth, so for instance, a customer sending a order, or the Odoo user sending back a shipping note, an invoice, whatever it is, it flows through our system, and then we kind of like harmonize all of that data to make it a lot easier for both parties. And so what I'm going to show you today is just a few kind of like very specific and tangible examples how we do that, just to give everybody a little bit of inspiration, kind of what AI can already do in the supply chain and where it also falls short by quite a lot. And so one of the examples, and for a lot of cases this is something that was traditionally done with OCR or just some other kind of like character recognition technology, is you have an order that comes in, for instance, from a B2B partner of yours, right? A PDF order. And then the way that works today is that usually there's kind of like a manual data entry team. So you have a couple of people just taking that order and putting it into your system, right? But usually the work doesn't stop there. So you might have another person kind of like checking if the inventory is actually available and then making decisions based on that. You might have another person or somebody within that team kind of doing the interaction with the fulfiller and telling them, hey, now is the time to ship it. You might have another person yet again who kind of speaks with the customer again and says, guys, this product that you ordered is not actually available anymore, and we have another substitute product that you could order instead. And then there's usually a team lead that oversees all of this. And through all of this, there's a ton of just manual work, manual friction, and usually a lot of interaction and back and forth with two parties. What we do, and this is of course overly simplified, is magical AI data processing. And basically what this does is we extract and interpret, enrich, harmonize all this data that is in the order, and then put that into the ERP system. And so a lot of the steps that then happen with kind of checking the data, informing the trade partner, a lot of these things can be automated because of it, right? Because you don't have every of these manual steps, but it's just like kind of like one harmonized flow. The way we do this is an agentic system. So we have basically different agents scanning through this document. So there might be one that's really strong at recognizing the trade partners. So understanding this is the buyer and this is the supplier. There might be another one that's really good at interpreting line items. So if you're in the food space, a line item would be just the product, the name, maybe the expiration date, how many, maybe if it's a box or a single unit. In fashion, you would have a big table that tells you here's a jacket, and you have it maybe in size S, L, whatever, and in different colors. And so these documents might look very different, and so we use agents to kind of like go through the different documents and figure out what it does. There's a bit of this kind of like, I would say like provocative statement that if a human can process it, so if a human can take the document and take a decision on it, if an AI has enough context, it can do the same. And I think that's where we invested a lot now, from adding more context for the agent to make better decisions. And so one of these examples is master data. So giving the agent the list of products that's even available. And then it can figure out, okay, which one is fitting with what's in the order. Another example is previous documents. So looking at, okay, there was another order that came through, and how did I interpret that in the past? Another one is industry and context. So what I was just mentioned with in the fashion industry or food industry, it looks quite different. And then the last one is user input. And so this is where I think it gets quite interesting, where as a user, when this document comes in, I could add instructions such as, hey, whenever it's a supplier that's from Switzerland, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And I can add that in natural language, and then the agent takes that again and does better things with it. And this is a quite cool system because you show this to somebody, and historically they've done all of this manually, and then you can kind of like prove it in the same second that it works and just flows through. So this one we're quite excited about. The next one we have is reconciling bulk payments. So I don't know if everybody's familiar with this, but if you're a supplier and you have retail partners, usually they send you money maybe like once a month or something like this. And then they send you what's called a remittance advice to tell you, hey, the 200,000 euros we sent you is for these 20 or 30 invoices. And then what the team does is, once again, manual data entry. So taking that and kind of going through one by one, figuring out, okay, is this invoice paid already? Is this still outstanding? Did they pay the right amount or not? And then usually there's a manual resolution if that doesn't work out. So that you send an email back and say, hey, dear retailer, you only send us 80 euros, but we invoiced you 100 euros. Where's the problem, right? And so what we do there is two things. The one is, of course, sounds fun again, but automatic reconciliation. So what we do is we match every remittance advice that comes in with the invoice that went through the system beforehand. And so then sometimes it's just kind of a deterministic match. So you would just have the invoice number. And sometimes it's a little bit more, I would say, intelligent to figure out, okay, which invoice is this and where does it belong to? And then the second thing we do is a guided resolution. So that an agent, for instance, would suggest, here's an answer that you can send to the trade partner, and then it creates that answer directly on the document. And then the user only has to click an approval button, say, yes, I want to request or open a claim or something like this. And then from there on, it kind of goes its automatic way. And so what this looks like is in our system like this. So you have all the invoices. This is one remittance advice. You can see what is reconciled. So these are perfect. And then everything that is either needing a user review, the user can just click on and review it. And if there's a discrepancy, also the user can click and maybe explain what the discrepancy is. And what we're working right now is this agent that kind of like sits in this same document. There's of course the clip art idea with do you want me to draft a claim message to your trade partner, but that's a little bit how it looks like. Of course in much nicer UI, but for the user to just kind of like take quick actions and not having to do the work themselves. And then the third one, last one on this list of examples, is submitting master data to retailers. And this is one that is incredibly cumbersome today. So usually when you are a supplier, you want to send data to a retailer, for instance, which products, which prices, etc. Usually you send an Excel sheet, and then you have to create this oftentimes in the retailer format. So the retailer gives you a specific format, you have to fill that out, you have to kind of like match where your product data is and where their product data is. And then you have, on the retailer side, also manual processing to get that into their PIM or ERP system. And then there's just a ton of back and forth, because usually what happens is a company would send the master data, and then the recipient says, hey, you missed the product identifier. And then they send back the Excel, and then this company fills it out again, and then it goes back and forth. And what we do there is two things. One is that we do these data checks and transformations. So if somebody sends a document, we can check whether all the required data is in there. And with AI, we can also check whether this data actually makes sense. So for instance, if you put in a color code or a color name or something like this, whether this is actually a legitimate color name or whether it's something totally different. And then the second thing we do is data enrichments with AI. And so the way this works is if you have, let's say, a fashion retailer, what they would usually do is they have, for instance, color codes in their system. They only have white, blue, red, something like this. But a supplier has all these different kind of like fancy names like Moon or Snow White or something like this. And so they have to somehow translate it into the retailer format. And so what we do there is take this data and use AI to translate it. And this is something that's usually done by humans, just really kind of like figuring out what does this data point mean, what does it mean in our system. Then there's a lot of errors happening. Similar with sizes, similar with products that might be duplicative or might be kind of like related to one another. And that's just one screenshot here, what that looks like in the system. So here's a supplier sending a product catalog or price catalog to a retailer, and then we check for all these different required fields. Here there's one example check where the AI also understands that, of course, the recommended retail price should be higher than the purchasing price, because otherwise it doesn't really make sense. But it's a like very usual error that somebody splits these or mixes up these two columns, basically. And then there's kind of rule-based ones, like whether the field is even filled, and then there's the, I would say, smart enrichments happening as well. And I think the beauty of this is that you take something that's very manual and very cumbersome for the users, and you just make it kind of like automatic or even this magical moment. And in the beginning, this is something where the user oftentimes still has to confirm. So they would see the suggested color is white, and then they confirm. But over time, this can become, of course, more agentic, that the user doesn't even have to intervene with it. So 3 examples, and just hopefully something to give you a little bit of inspiration of where AI already works well. There are quite a few limitations of AI, and one of them is that AI has hallucinations and it's non-deterministic in its nature. And so what you can do now is if you take out your phone again and look at your previous answer that you received from your model, and then open a new chat with the same model and put in the exact same prompt. So you copy paste the prompt and put it into the same model again. And you can do that right now. And just see that it's going to give you a slightly different answer than the one before. And so before that, it might tell you, hey, it's really cool to do forecasting for supply chain, and that's going to help you. And this time it's going to tell you maybe the same, but in different words, or it's going to tell you a totally different thing, right? And the difficulty of that is in supply chains, in a lot of cases, you want deterministic outcomes, because you want to know that a shipping node that has a certain unit number and a certain quantity reaches the recipient with exactly that data. Another example is if you get an order and the AI invents additional products that were being ordered, it's of course quite frustrating for both sides because then they're going to ship it and then there's going to be issues in that. And so there's a lot of things that you have to consider when working with AI models in supply chain, just that there have to be guardrails in place for the AI not to take too much action or have too much creativity, basically. The second one is, in a lot of cases, AI is what we call middle to middle and not end to end. And so what that means is it works incredibly well for simple use cases. So if any of you takes a very simple order form and drops it into ChatGPT, it's going to give you a pretty good structure of the data, and it's going to be 90% correct, I would say. But if it's a more complex version, a more complex order, it's just going to create totally different data, or it's going to trip up and do something different. And so with a lot of these things, also when you hear about AI in production and AI in kind of like broader use cases or more difficult use cases, it often fails because people don't think about it in this way of like you have to kind of like guide it through the process step by step instead of just like throwing it and hoping and praying that it's going to come up with a good solution. One other limitation. And then the last one is retrofitting versus reinventing. And I think this one, there's a really cool example from Tesla when they did their old autopilot or autonomous driving. In the old days, this was like traditional machine learning. So you would have, I would say, like rule-based versions. And then now they've moved to an AI version of that. And so before that, you would have to describe every time, okay, if a user does this, if a user does this, what is the car supposed to do? Or if another car brakes, please brake. And then you have a lot of descriptions and so on. And with an AI-based version, you just have the computer kind of figure out the outcome. So you just give it a lot of training data, tell it what a human did in that situation, and then it kind of figures out in a lot easier way what it's supposed to do. And that's the same with supply chain too. You have to think about it a little bit about kind of like some processes, you just have to strip them entirely and rebuild them from the ground up. And some you keep them how they are and just use kind of AI in every step. And there's a really just interesting picture. This is from 1803. And this was the horseless carriage. So this was one of the first prototypes of somebody envisioning what a carriage without a horse looks like. And what you can clearly see is they just kind of took what they knew and just built the same version with a steam engine. But in reality, it doesn't work at all. And so that's a little bit what sometimes happens when we're applying AI to an old system. We're kind of looking at it as like, okay, let's put these nuts and bolts on and hope that it works well, when in reality, in a lot of cases, you would have to kind of remove the full process and start from the ground up. What we believe in is that over time, the world is going to change quite a lot with how people and companies interact with one another. So as I described today in these different use cases, there's always a lot of humans involved. And I think in the future, it's going to be more kind of like humans and agents working hand in hand. And so one example is if you have a customer ops team doing the data entry and kind of like supporting the customers, there's a world where you would have just 2 people instead of 5, and then you have these 3 very friendly agents kind of helping with the process. Similar in accounts receivables, you can have a version where you still need a couple of people to do the checks and so on, but a lot of the, I would say, monotonous and very easy to automate work is going to be done by agents. And then the idea or the hope is really that companies have more time for these strategic and value-adding tasks, right? So speaking with suppliers, finding new kind of like prospects that they can deal with, spending more time with customers and so on, and shifting a lot of the labor towards these more strategic tasks, I would say. So that's a little bit how we envision this. I would say in the short run, because in the long run, it's quite hard to anticipate whether you still need all these different teams at all. Then just to share a couple of examples from who we work with and what we do. So we work with retailers in Germany. This is companies like Bräuninger, Flaconi, Niche Beauty. So in the, I would say, fashion and beauty space. We also have a lot of customers in the food space. So a company like Tony's, Y-Food and Coro, some of you might know them. And what's really cool to see is that for them, some of these tasks that are high effort, they can strip them almost entirely. So it's 95% that they can reduce it. But the more interesting stuff for them is usually that they have these business outcomes that they enable. So in the case of Bräuninger, for instance, because they have better data, their cycle time in the warehouse decreased by 50%. So when they get a product, it's 50% faster in the store. And so some of these things that just make the teams more productive. And what we've seen with the customers, we did this analysis of benchmark in each of the industries, and then the customers that work with us, and they have 2.4% faster revenue growth. So I don't know if this is correlation or causation, but definitely something that's interesting. That just some of these companies that embrace this change, usually scale their teams a lot faster. And then just one closing remark, maybe, what our vision behind all of this is, and I think where a lot of people, when you kind of like think through the implications of this, is that at some point, a lot of the trade between companies is fully autonomous. So where you have humans today making decisions, it's these more autonomous systems that kind of like figure out if there's a discrepancy, and then they resolve it, and then they pull it from another system and so on. But it's not something where most companies would just jump from today doing a manual process to, hey, we have a fully autonomous setup. But it's more these intermediary steps that you would start with just digitizing something. Then you have these kind of like rule-based automations where you say, like, every time I get a data point, I want to actually check it. Then there's this intermediary step where you have a co-pilot, so an agent working alongside you, and then you still confirming and approving. And then in the long run, we really see that it's going to be a fully autonomous setup. So hopefully some good inspiration for everybody. We have time for questions if everybody has some. And thanks for your attention. There is one question. Can we have the access to the presentation via Drive? Yeah, we'll share it afterwards.
So feel free to ask any questions on the app.
Yeah.
There's coming.
There's one.
There's
one question. Our main supplier is not listed on Procuros. What requirements must be met for us to exchange data with the supplier? So usually because of the AI, we're able to handle any format. And so we just have to get sample data from them, and then we can ingest it. But it's usually just a couple of days until we onboard them. Yeah, nice. Cool. Amazing. Then thank you so much for your attention. Really appreciate it. Serafin, my colleague, is here. We're in Hall 7, P8 with TSC. And then I'm also here, of course, for questions, and I would love to discuss more with you. Thank you, guys.